The 3764 Elvis Presley Boulevard. Hit it, Elvis. You got me.
Hey everybody, hope you're having a great day. At the time of this video going out, it's been a couple weeks since Elvis Week. We had a great time down there. We enjoyed meeting all of you and seeing some folks again. The events were just great. One thing that we did while we were down there was we had a great opportunity to take Elvis's co-pilot, Ron Strauss, back on the Lisa Marie after a few years and let him share stories with us about his time with Elvis. It was a great opportunity. We had a great time, and it was just something that we'll never forget. When we got there, we were escorted down to the plane with Mr. Strauss. Luckily, there was nobody on the plane. It was right when they opened, so there wasn't anybody down there. And we were able to film, and we walked him through the plane and just let him share stories with us. Now, the bad news with this is because of the general rule at Graceland where it says no video, we were kind of at a crossroads where we didn't know if we were allowed to release it. So we contacted Graceland and asked if we would be able to release what we filmed, and we never heard back from them. So like I said, unfortunately, what you're gonna hear is the audio from that interview. You're not gonna see the video portion. In the future, if we find another way to share it with you, whether it's on a new platform or Graceland gets back to us, we'll definitely share that video with you guys, the full interview. But you know, unfortunately, that's just how it ended up. So we apologize for that. One thing to note is it's not going to be a formal interview. So right after this video, it's going to just go straight into Mr. Strauss telling us stories. We didn't do a formal introduction, so just bear that in mind. But again, we just apologize that we're not able to share the video portion of the interview at this time. But we hope that you guys enjoy hearing the audio portions of the interview with Elvis's co-pilot, Ron Strauss.
Talk about in the book, and we won't tell all the details because we want people to get your book, because the book is fantastic. When I got the book, when you signed it on our trip home, as soon as I got on the airplane for the flight home, I read your book from front to back. I did, and it was enjoyable. A lot of good, funny stories, and so easy to read. And it was kind of like almost like having a conversation with you sitting at a coffee table. So if anybody, if anybody wants to pick up a copy of that book and read it, I highly suggest it, because it's fun to read and you tell so many good stories in there. But give me just a little bit of glimpse of Pittsburgh. We'll go back to 1976, the New Year's Eve show, and you had a bomb threat, right?
Yeah. Well, you know, after Elvis performed, and it was just at daybreak, and we taxied out just like we normally do, and the FBO TWA said, hey, come on back, we want to talk to you. No, we ain't coming back. Well, come on back. No, we're not coming back. He says, well, you got a bomb scare, you better come back. Whoop. So we stopped immediately, and we called Joe up to the cockpit, Joe Esposito. I said, Joe, we got a bomb scare, we're going to taxi back. Nah, he says, just wait a minute. So he went back to Elvis. He talked to Elvis, and he said, come back to the cockpit. And he says, go to Memphis. He says, I says, but we got a bomb scare. And he says, hey, look, we've been getting these scares since 55 or thereabouts. And he said, take it to Memphis. So it was my leg, and I just picked. We have a restriction of 250 knots below 10,000 feet. And I just picked the gear flaps up and just drove it as hard as I could go. And we stayed at lower altitude, maybe 20s, in the mid-20s. And the same way, landed in here. We just waited until last day, threw everything out, and moved on.
And the other one that I love is I love the story, and it happened right here, according to your book, where you tell the story about one day you were talking about Linda, about how she got on the plane, and you just thought she was the prettiest thing, and
she was. And I'll tell you the story. You know, normally, if we were just going out on someplace to have fun, Linda and Elvis would always come in the cockpit and say, hey gang, do you need anything? No, we're fine. And then this one time she walked in. I hadn't seen her in probably about a month or so. And where we're at, she came in and I was doing paperwork and I just was doing like this. Turned around, hey, how's it going? And my mouth just dropped because here was Linda Thompson, and she was a knockout. She was Miss Runner-Up or something, Tennessee, 72 or whatever it was. And here she was. She had an American Native outfit on, and the blonde hair with a feather in her hair. And my mouth just dropped. And I won't use the words Elvis used, but he said, Ron, don't even think about it.
Right.
And so we went wherever it was, and we landed, and she came in the cockpit, and she always would kiss the engineer, us two pilots, on the cheek. And she whispered, as she kissed me on the cheek, she whispered in my ear, don't give up, Ron, you still got a chance.
I love that story.
Yeah. So, and that was neat. She was a real nice girl.
Yeah. Just about every flight, Elvis would come up and have a conversation with you, check in on you.
And you know, Elvis sat in this jump seat on one of our landings. And I'll tell you a story, but it was pretty neat. He sat in this jump seat, and then after landing, I was talking to the tower, finding out where we were going to get fuel. And he said, well, try that Texaco or whatever it was. And so Elvis got up and stood behind that jump seat. And we taxied in. And this manager, young manager, maybe 30 years old or so, he came right by Elvis. So, what do you guys want? I said, well, we want fuel. And he says, how much do you want? I said, probably 5,000 gallons. And Elvis was in his jumpsuit just standing behind him. And he said, well, who in the hell's going to pay for that? I said, that guy right there. And he looked, Elvis Presley, you know. And he shook his hand, and then he said, hey, my wife's in love with you. He says, can she meet you? Elvis said, sure, no problem. And then Elvis came back here, whatever he did. And we were busy. And then finally, we told the manager, I said, you know, it was right at daybreak. I said, tell your wife to get out here because we can't drag our feet too much longer. Finally, security came up and said, hey, do we have a maintenance problem? I said, no problem. It takes a little time, you know. And then we couldn't wait any longer, so we closed up and took off, taxied out, and we were taxiing out. And this gal, and she was good looking, said, hey, wait, stop. Well, hell, we couldn't stop. We just kept on going. But it was neat.
Any given flight, your inspection of the plane would include, you did a walkthrough here too as well, right?
Not much. We just generally inspected, and you know, for fire extinguishers and stuff like that.
Okay.
But generally, no.
Okay. Do you recall, well, you're up there, so, you know, I'm thinking in terms of, you really didn't have much of an idea what was really going on back
I didn't
there,
have
right?
any idea.
You didn't know where Elvis, they say that he liked to sit in that one seat, but again, you never would have known that.
No.
Okay.
Because the only break that we would take from the cockpit would be the bathroom. And that was it.
And that, you used that one right there, right?
Exactly.
Be sure to check out those belts. They're clean and 24-karat gold. Nothing will stress.
Mr. Strauss, if you would talk a little bit about your initial, the first time that you met him, what was that like? I know I read in the book where you said he didn't want you calling him Mr. Presley. So,
you know, it was funny because I think it was on one of these chairs he was sitting, and you know, we came from Nashville to here after we getting the airplane certified.
Mm-hmm.
And then we landed, and we thought there'd be a big crowd. There was nobody here, nothing. That's strange. So we went home, and the next day, the crew came out here, and we sat all day, nothing. Boy, that's really strange. So we went home. And then the third day, we got a call from Joe Esposito. said, "Hey, Joe, Elvis wants to see the airplane." And I said, "Oh, okay." So we drove out quick as we could. And here all three of us looking out the cockpit window. And here comes Elvis. Jesus, this is really impressive.
This is happening.
Yeah. And he, of course, toured the airplane. He hadn't seen it completely done yet. And then he wanted to, meet the crew. Well, Ella David came out first, talked to Elvis, and then it was my turn. And I came out and talked to him. And he says, "Well, I guess you know who I am." And I says, "Yes, sir, Mr. Presley." And he says, No, none of this. He says, "May I call you Ron?" I said, "Sure." And then he says, "It's Elvis." And that's the way it was from then on in.
Wow.
And it was quite, he had this grin on his face and a little nipple on his lip. And he was sitting right there. And that was it.
He was proud of this plane.
He was, yeah. And he was proud of the crew.
Yeah. What's your fondest, if you could just nail down, I know it's tough because you got so many memories of working for him in that period of time, but what if you could just say this was my favorite memory of flying this plane and it may not even include Elvis. So what's your fondest memory of the plane?
Oh, that's a hard one.
That's a hard one.
Well, I'll tell you the story. And I told it in the book. Elvis wanted to take Ginger Alton to Hawaii. So I found out about it, and I called Joe, and I said, "Hey, Joe, I'd like to take my wife on this trip." And he says, "Oh, look, we got 4 open seats out of Memphis here. We had to pick up fuel in Oakland." But he says, "The airplane's booked at Oakland." And I said, "Joe, are you sure?" And he says, "I'm positive." Well, we got to Oakland. There was 4 open seats. And off we went to Hawaii. And Elvis came in the cockpit. "Hey, how's it going?" And I said, "Good, no problem. We'll be there in a couple hours. And the weather's good, no problem." And he says, "Ron, your wife should be on this airplane, Betty." And I says, "Maybe next time, no problem." "No," he says, "it is a problem." And I says, "What do you mean?" And because nobody says no to Elvis,
Right.
And I just refused it. And he said, "Well, you like working for me?" And I said, "Yes, sir." He said, "I told you none of this yes, sir stuff. It's Elvis and Ron." I said, "Yep." And he says, "Do I pay you enough?" I said, "Yep." He says, "Look, I'm paying for everything. First class airline ticket for your wife from Memphis to Hawaii and back. And if she's not out here tomorrow, I'll fire your ass."
Wow.
And I said, "I'm not going to take the chance,
Right.
I don't think he would have fired me, but I wasn't going to chance." So he paid first class airline ticket for my wife from Memphis to Honolulu. She spent 3 or 4 days there, and then had to get back because of her job and the kids. And so on the return flight, we came back, I don't know, 5, 6, 7 days later. And Elvis says, he came in the cockpit and he says, "Hey, did Betty enjoy her stay?" And I says, "She really did. And she wants to thank you. And me, I want to thank you for doing that for her. And no problem at all. Nothing's too good for my troops."
Wow.
And so then I got back and I had a stack of maintenance bills that Vernon, his father, had to authorize. And so I gave them to him. And then I had this airline ticket. I wish I'd have kept it. I don't know how much it cost back then. And I says, "Mr. Presley, would you look at it?" He says, "Nancy, just pay him." And I says, "But Mr. Presley, don't you want to look at it?" He said, "No." He said, "I talked to Elvis last night and he told me all about it. No problem, just pay him." Gave me a check and that was it.
He was a class act, wasn't he?
He was, yeah.
A lot of people that we've talked to, Mr. Strauss, we talked to them about how it was to work with him. That we've talked to band members that said, he wanted perfection, but he wasn't hard on his people. So talk a little bit about how, kind he was and how easygoing he was. A lot of people have said if you didn't know he was Elvis Presley, you wouldn't have known, you know, that he's the superstar, because he didn't act like a superstar.
He was a pleasure to work with, absolutely. Now his father was a lot stricter, but not him. He just could care less about everything.
Well, we have one story, and I want to share I want you to share just a little bit of tidbit. We'll go back to Elvis's room, and I want you to just give a little story about you decided to you needed to take a little nap one day, right?
I'll talk to you about
All right. So to set up the story, you were on tour?
Well, no, we were called by Joe or Charlie to go to the airplane because Elvis wanted to go wherever he wanted to go. And so we said, okay. So when I got done with all my paperwork, the other flight engineer and the other pilot and the flight attendant, they all had their different places they slept. And the only place to sleep was Elvis's bed. So I just got under, took off my boots, and put the cover over my face, or my body. And then security, I think it was Dick Grove, he came up. I was sound asleep. And the security always showed before Elvis did, just check with us if everything was okay. And it was. And I was sound asleep. And Dick Grove came back here and woke me up. He says, "Hey, Ron, what are you doing sleeping?" And I says, "Well, I was sleeping comfortably until you awoke me." He says, "You better get up to the cockpit because Elvis is on his way." Oh, boy. So then we took off and went someplace or wherever. And Elvis came in the cockpit. He says, "Hey, Ron, how you doing?" I said, "I'm doing good." And I was going to tell him the story. I got caught sleeping in his bed. He says, I understand you got caught sleeping in my bed. And I said, "Yeah, Elvis, I did." He says, "You can sleep in my bed anytime you want."
Good story.
Yeah.
Good story. So, again, your favorite story, but I did read in the book where at one point in time, your brother got to fly with you on the plane.
He did. He flew from Omaha to Lincoln. And we put him in the cockpit. He never did meet Elvis.
Okay.
But I asked Joe, I says, "Hey, Joe, we're just going from Omaha to Lincoln. Can my brother Jerry ride in the cockpit?" And he says, "Absolutely, no problem." Or he says, "Wait a minute, let me talk to Elvis first." And they talked to Elvis, came back. He says, "Yeah, do what you want." So off we went.
So we talked a little bit earlier about you're on call 24 hours a day. So this is back going on 50 years ago. I mean, in a few years, we're looking at 50. So no cell phones. So you're on call 24 hours a day. So say you want to go play golf with your buddies. You're not doing it.
You know, I went to the races in West Memphis one time, and supposedly, you know, they said they wanted to contact me because Elvis wanted to go someplace, and they couldn't contact me, and that was it.
Wow.
But we were on call 24 hours. Lots of times, you know, I'd go to sleep with my kids, or the kids would go to sleep, and when they woke up, they said, "Where's Dad?" He's gone.
Wow. You know, we've met a lot of people in the Elvis world, and I can honestly tell you that we've interviewed several people. And one thing that I will say, and I'm not just saying this because I'm standing here with you, but Michael and I have met so many nice, kind people. And we have always said, it just seemed like Elvis was surrounded with some of the best people that this world had to offer. You're absolutely no exception.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you.